Warning. This work of fiction, intended for adults, contains strong language and graphic depictions of violence. Discretion advised. The Ballad of the Flower, Book 1, Druid. Written and performed by Neal Lensenmayer. Chapter 20. Tara kept looking back at the little shrinking settlement so often that Carson put her in front of the caravan. Now, whenever she turned, all she saw were his broad shoulders and a muscular frame hidden under off-white clothes. They all had their weapons with them, in one of the traveling packs that they were carrying, but every other available space was storing water. Even Tara was carrying a sloshing water skin, determined to do her part, though the straps hurt her shoulders. Her lips were getting chapped already. There wasn't even wind out here, just stagnant, dry air that seemed to be sucking the moisture out of her one drop at a time. Noon seemed to be lasting forever, the sun beating down on them in waves of warmth that were demoralizing and exhausting. Tara was glad Carson was behind her, a driving force ever forward, even when the sight of endless dunes threatened to drive her insane. The little bricks in the road were occasional now, little oddities in the sand worthy of celebration. It was in the middle of one such little mental celebration that Tara heard Adam from behind her. "We should take a break, boss." Tara could have kissed him. Carson conceded, and they leaned against the side of a dune, trying to find some kind of shade. The water was sweet, and Tara made the conscious effort to savor every drop. She was looking off into the distance ahead of them, her eyes tired from looking at the tiny pavestones. Adam was next to her, and she could feel his eyes going over her and the rest of the group, really. "I haven't heard anything," he whispered to her. Tara noted the concern in his voice. "There's nothing out here." Tara had long since stopped trying to get the sand out of her hair, deciding to put it up in her head wrapping. "I haven't felt anything either," Tara offered. "It's bizarre." Tara thought about the different spells she knew, trying to conceive of a way to bring green life back to this place. She didn't know any spells that powerful, but she had heard of druids who could control entire weather systems and do all sorts of powerful magics to shape the world to their will. She shrugged them off as rumors. Adam took a deep breath and stood from his spot on the dune. "Everyone all right?" There were no complaints. Tara kept an eye on Ciri. She looked strong and collected, even a little bored. Barney was still gulping water. Tara worried most about him. Thoughts came in again, thoughts about saving her friends, choices to make. So long as there weren't any owl bears, Adam would probably survive anything nature threw at him. Adam was also borderline obsessed with keeping Carson safe, so she wouldn't have to worry about him either. Tara didn't think that anything could kill Ciri, which meant that her main goal was to keep Barney alive. While they were standing and stretching, she made her way over to him under the pretense of fixing his shirt. Even as she touched him, she felt sweat in his clothes. He had lost a lot of water. "Hold still," she whispered, and found a spot on his back that would be receptive to the spell. She concentrated on increasing his endurance, and took on a bit of his weariness to make them both a bit stronger. The effect was immediate. "Thanks," Barney whispered, his breathing more stable. Adam took the lead this time. His tall body stood looking strong against the elements. He seemed to be doing fairly well, Tara thought, but she would check up on all of them once they stopped for the night. Tara couldn't wait for the sun to disappear behind the dunes, spare her and her friends from all this heat. She caught herself thinking of the goddess Eliana, the sun, and asked for forgiveness. Gods seemed to like that sort of thing. There was so much sand in the air that the sun was almost easy to look at while it set. There was orange and purple in the sky, and the sun was halfway past the horizon when Carson gave the word to stop the march. There was no wood for a fire, which Tara didn't think would be a problem until the cold began to set in. The sweat in her clothes seemed to chill her skin, and she found herself shivering as they cleared away some sand. They were 20 yards away from the road, making sure they could find the pavestones in front of and behind them. Barney had gotten his spellbook from his bag and started to summon a dome for them, a small piece of shelter that could be warmed or cooled and even made invisible from the outside. He made it see-through, though, so that nothing would be able to sneak up on them. They took turns passing around a water skin, and between the cold and the water, they were all feeling a lot better. Tara took the time to check over her friends. There were a few sunburns in places that Tara really hadn't expected. A bare patch on Adam's leg, the back of Ciri's hands. Easy enough to fix, but everything was scarce out here. She was thankful that most of her healing magic didn't need components. They were all at least a bit dehydrated, and the only cure for that was water. Barney seemed to be recovering well, which Tara was thankful for, because he was probably their most useful tool out here. If they really, really needed to, they could make some stone from the sand and teleport out, but they would need to buy at least 15 minutes of time, virtually an eternity in a fight. She got to Ciri last, and was a little bit worried when she saw her looking up into the sky, a blank expression on her face. Tara wondered if this was some odd symptom of heat exhaustion or desert madness, but when she followed her sightline, she understood. She had never seen so many stars in her life. It was almost bright in the sky above them, some constellations she recognized, designating winter or close to it, but others were strangers. The sky looked like it was filled with dust, like the desert had been sucked up by the wind and was fighting to be seen against the stars. Barney caught both of them staring. "Right?" was all he said, bringing out his journal and writing something down. Tara could only hear the scratching of his quill. She couldn't look away from the sky. "I hear it's going to be hot tomorrow," Adam said, breaking the illusion. "Hot and dry," Barney said, writing something down. "How does everything look?" Carson asked. He had been so still, Tara thought he was sleeping. "All I can see is disaster, but that's been there my whole life. It's all connected to the war," Barney said. "Anything specific?" Carson asked. Barney huffed a little, squinting at the sky, turning north, and squinting again. "It's just a blanket statement of doom." Tara made a little sound, standing and pointing at a bright, fast-moving object in the sky. "What does that mean?" Tara asked, finding Ciri's hand with hers. Barney had a sad smile on his face. "Technically, it means a change of fortune, either good or bad." He looked at his book. "But in this context, it probably means hope." It was odd, sleeping out under the stars again. Adam, Ciri, and Carson took watch that night, Carson insisting that the casters stay as fresh as possible in case they needed to do something extreme. Tara thought that marching through a desert towards an enemy stronghold was extreme enough, but saying it out loud wouldn't make anyone feel any better about it. Ciri took the lead the next morning, and Tara was right behind her, using her long shadow for shade. "You're not staring at my butt, are you?" Ciri asked, not even turning around. "Nope." Tara hoped the blush didn't show in her voice. "You don't like my butt?" Ciri said, a bit of a laugh in her voice. "No, I do. I just... Carson, help," Tara said, turning to see Carson grinning. "I don't know what you want me to do in this situation," Carson said. "Tell Ciri she has a nice butt," Tara said, hoping the glare from the sun would hide the color in her cheeks. Ciri was snort-laughing now, still walking forward. "That's not going to help," Carson said. His grin was now a full-on smile. "Well, she does." Tara was unsure of what to do with her hands. She ended up crossing them over her chest. Ciri turned her head, giving a questioning eye to Carson now. "What, you want me to say you have a nice butt?" Carson asked, smiling again. "A girl likes to feel pretty sometimes," Ciri said, fluttering her eyelashes. "You have a very nice butt, Ciri," Carson said at last, seeing no other way out of it. "For the record," Adam said from behind Barney, "I wasn't staring at your butt." "Nobody likes a liar, Adam," Tara said. "People actually love me, thank you very much," Adam said. "You seem to appreciate it when I got you out of trouble with Juniper." "There was trouble with Juniper?" Carson asked. "Who's Juniper?" Ciri asked. Her voice was a bit quiet since she was facing the other direction. "No one worth mentioning," Adam said. "Did you stare at Juniper's butt?" Ciri asked. Tara could tell she was smiling. "Yeah, Ciri, sometimes I did. I stare at a lot of butts," Adam said, bluffing a little too hard. "Was it nice?" Ciri said, exaggerating the shake in her hips. "It wasn't bad," Tara said, thinking back. "Tara!" Adam said. His face was an exquisite version of surprised. "What? You have good taste. I mean, she was mean, but she wasn't bad looking." Tara was now very much looking at Ciri's butt. "I mean, you'd be mean too if you were left at the altar," Barney finally chipped in. There was a pushing sound, and Barney laughed. "Wait, you were going to marry her?" Tara looked away from Ciri's hips and back at Adam, who was practically steaming. "Yeah, I was engaged, but then Carson showed up." "Hey, you had cold feet before I did anything." Carson raised his hands defensively. "You can't blame me for giving you a way out." "Wait, what? Who is this girl?" Ciri asked. The marching order had turned more into a cluster. The wood elf girl I told you about. She's Hale's right hand or something, Tara said. She got promoted to right hand? Carson asked. Man, you should have married her. I was going to be Hale's right hand. I was being groomed to be governor. Adam sounded awfully defensive to Tara. Tara said she was kind of bitchy, Siri said skeptically. She's just a really driven person, and she expects a lot of herself, and it bleeds into her expectations for others. She really does care about people, Adam said. He was definitely defending his decisions. You really liked her, huh? Tara said. Yeah, I really did. Adam crossed his arms. But you say you're thinking about marrying someone and just everyone comes out of the woodwork. Like, oh, what colors are you thinking? How many kids do you want? Where are you going to live? And it takes all the romance out of everything. They were all on either side of Adam now. And then suddenly you start thinking, and it's innocent enough. Like, why is this happening? What are all these stressed out feelings? And you can't even look at her anymore because all you see are the questions and the pressure, and you can't talk to your parents about all that because, they've invested a lot in the relationship too at that point, and they really want you to get married. Adam was breathing hard. His steps had gotten faster, and Tara had to focus on keeping up. And you can't disappoint your parents, right? I mean, I love them so much, and they only really want that one thing, and they've been so accepting of me as a person, and I feel like I owe them for raising me, right? Carson was rubbing one of Adam's shoulders with a comforting hand. And I know, Adam went on, I know I don't owe them, but I feel like I do, It's just... it's a sore spot of mine. He was quiet for a second. His pace slowed down a bit as Carson kept his arm around him. Adam, Siri said, touching his free shoulder. I'm never going to ask you to marry me. Siri smiled, and Adam looked up at her. Thanks, Adam said finally, with a bit of a choked-up sound. I'd say yes, of course. I know. Siri patted his shoulder, but not unkindly. They walked in their little clump for a while. I think we all have pretty nice butts, Barney said. And if Barney said it, Tara thought, it must be true. When they stopped to rest, Tara made sure they all drank as much as they could. They would be at their destination by nightfall, probably before, and they could fill up on water there. While they drank, Carson explained a few things that they needed to know. Fort Bransett, the stronghold in question, was a major training station for the Riken military. There was also a bit of a trading center there, as well as a small town that had cropped up around the fort. The walls had been expanded around the settlement, and there would be other humans there too, mostly wayfinders. The tricky part would be determining what could stay and what had to go. Obviously, destroying the entire fort would be the best procedure, but there were innocents and civilians there, forming an interesting sort of barrier between them and their goal. One thing was clear, though. With the destruction of this post, the Rikens would lose a major link in its supply chain of troops, and the troops that they did send would be less well trained. The rest of the walk was spent learning some basic phrases in Draconic. Introductions, the words for food and water, please and thank you, little things to make them seem like polite and inconsequential tourists. Tara took the opportunity to polish the little dwarvish she knew, figuring that knowing at least one language other than Common would be good for her. Adam was the first to see the walls, of course. Once they crested a dune, he pointed out a small speck on the horizon, a little bit after noon. It was another hour before Tara finally got a good look at it, seeing the general shape of a few towers and a lot of walls. The sun was almost entirely gone, and a few torches lit the walls when they finally approached a high, manned gate. Barney stepped up first, and after a brief conversation, they were let in. The walls were made from stone, high granite rocks that were built to withstand the storms and sands, but the interior buildings, the little shops and homes, were all made of sandstone, probably quarried from somewhere nearby. There was no wood out here, and what Tara had thought were torches were actually globes of magical light that were stuck into old torch holders. The fort proper was back a ways, designated by its own separate series of walls. There was a moment before Tara noticed they had all formed back into their old protective formation around her and Barney, a sure sign that everyone was nervous. She coughed into her hand, and the others realized what they were doing. It was small enough in the walled-off section that they had explored all of it in about 15 minutes. They arbitrarily called the spring-fed fountain in the middle of town their main point, and tried their best to look casual as they filled their water skins. The signs all had common translations under the draconic names, and there were maybe 6 other humans that Tara had seen, all wayfinders. There were dragonborn everywhere, ranging from tall to freakishly tall, all of them rippling with muscle and covered in brightly colored scales. Tara felt small again. The sun was completely gone now, and there were patches of darkness all along the streets, so they went to a boarding house that they had scouted out a bit earlier. There was a dull-scaled dragonborn behind the desk, and she greeted them in common. "Welcome." The words seemed practiced, but her voice was rough-sounding. She seemed a bit relieved when Barney spoke to her in Draconic. They each paid a silver piece and moved to a long, narrow-feeling room that was lined with beds. Not exactly a lot of privacy to plan an attack. They found a relatively empty section. There were only a few others in the room, humans and elves. They all crowded around Tara's bunk, thinking it was funny to be on the bed of someone so innocent, as Adam had put it. The plans that Carson and Siri had taken from the guard post gave them a rough idea of where exactly everything was in the actual fort. There were a few spots that they would try to scout out, either sending Tara out around the walls to search, or through good old-fashioned sneaking around. Barney leaned over Tara's shoulder to get a closer look. "That wall is too small," he said, pointing to a line on the map. I think it's a pretty rough sort of map, Barney," Carson said. "No," Barney said matter-of-factly. "Everything else is correctly proportioned, but that wall is too small." He pointed again. "Barney," Adam asked, "why would the map be wrong?" "They're hiding something," Carson said. "Could there be enough space for a room on this wall?" "That's almost probably what it is," Barney said. "Maybe a secret room?" "An intelligence room," Carson said. "Can we get in?" "I can try and climb the wall, but I'll get shot down," Adam said. "Can we fight our way in?" Siri offered. "We'd have to fight our way out, too," Carson countered. "We could bring it down to the ground floor," Tara said. They all looked at her. "If we blow up the room, we might blow up the intel," Carson said, raising an eyebrow. "We don't have to blow anything up. It's all sandstone. I can send up some roots and break the whole thing down." Tara had been thinking about using roots to bring down all of the sandstone walls inside the larger granite ones, forcing civilians outside of the fort before they destroyed the whole thing. "Can you do it in one specific spot that won't get noticed?" Carson asked her, his curious gaze replaced with a new appreciation. "Probably," Tara said. "I can do a lot with vines." "What's under the secret room?" Adam asked, flipping through the plans. "It's the kitchen," Siri said, pointing out the spot. On this layer, it was now obvious to them that some space had been erased on the floor above. "We can win a lot of points with the boss if we bring her extra intel," Adam said. His smile was thin and a little greedy, like someone planning to swipe an extra cookie for dessert. "That we can," Carson said, touching his chin. "We get the info and topple the rest. Barney's been working on a way to take out the fort and leave the settlement intact. Even if they can rebuild it, it'll take a while." Barney went into an in-depth explanation of the physics of explosions and made little marks at exact points along the fort walls that would need to be destroyed for a controlled demolition. Tara was a little concerned with the shine in Barney's eyes as he discussed destroying several tons of rock, but decided that for now, it was very helpful. They leaned back after the lecture. "Fucking casters, man," Adam said. "I really am glad we got at least one of you." End of chapter.